up on New Day at Arirang, another day with new COVID-19 cases in the six-figure range in South Korea as Omicron continues to rip through the population. On the vaccine front, reservations for the Novavax jab, the fifth shot to be approved in South Korea, starts on Monday. Western leaders warn that Russia is gearing up for war in Ukraine, despite that country's president asking Vladimir Putin for a meeting to discuss his demands. French President Emmanuel Macron also speaks with Putin, with the pair agreeing on the need to find a diplomatic solution. Plus, the curtain comes down on the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics with the closing ceremony, which sees the torch handed to Milan, the host city of the 2026 Winter Games. Norway tops the medal standings. South Korea ends in 14th with 2 gold, 5 silver and 2 bronze medals.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. February 21st here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Mo-kyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Over the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing South Korea and the world. We start, though, with the COVID-19 situation in South Korea. The daily caseload continues to hover around the 100,000 range. As a result, the number of people receiving treatment at home is climbing at a rapid pace.
For more, our reporter Shin Yin is here in the studio with us. Good morning, Yin.
Good morning.
So let's start with the tally for today.
Well, we're expecting to see the daily figure reach the high 90,000s because as of 9 p.m. Sunday, we saw 93,260 new infections. Though this was a drop by some 7,000 from a day ago, it was still roughly double the amount reported the same time last week. And following Sunday's edition, South Korea has now recorded more than 2 million infections nationwide. The country added more than 1 million infections in the past 2 weeks. On February 6th, we saw the total COVID-19 tally surpass 1 million for the first time.
Now, given the surge in the number of Omicron patients, the number of people treating themselves at home for the symptoms of this variant is also on the rapid rise. Just how many people are at home, isolated, treating themselves for Omicron right now?
Well, as you mentioned, we're seeing the number of people being treated at home double, just like we're seeing new Omicron infections double each week. As of Sunday, there was a total of 450,493 people receiving at-home treatment, which was actually twice the amount reported a week ago. Compared to 2 weeks ago, this figure has gone up by roughly 4-fold. Because figures are doubling each week, many have raised concerns that medical infrastructure is unable to keep up. Authorities tried to address this medical crunch by expanding the number of hospitals and clinics that provide phone counseling or provide remote prescriptions. As of February 10th, there were only 1,856 clinics. Authorities expanded this number to more than 6,050 in a week. But many have raised concerns that there still aren't enough medical staff on standby to help those who need to be treated at home, especially those who are in self-isolation without a caregiver in the same house. Now, if you recall, in early February, health officials divided people infected with COVID-19 into 2 categories, the intensive management group and the regular management group. Those in the intensive management group are subject to constant monitoring and more intensive care because they're considered at high risk. They receive 2 daily health checkups from medical staff who are always on standby. They also receive treatment kits, which include fever medication, thermometers, and self-test equipment. They may also be prescribed with Paxlovid, the antiviral COVID-19 pills. To fall under this category, you either have to be immunocompromised, 50 and above with underlying conditions, or aged 60 and above. Most people are asymptomatic or have mild symptoms and therefore fall under the regular management group. And this group isn't provided with treatment kits, nor are they actively monitored like those in the intensive management group. It's only if their symptoms worsen that this group can contact their local hospital or clinic to access remote healthcare services. Now, once they receive permission, they can visit an outpatient treatment center. But contacting local hospitals has been quite the headache for this group because many have said the lines were always busy. So there's constant demand for more medical staff standing by for people at home that need care, as we're expecting to see the number of people with COVID-19 at home reach 1 million by early next month.
So given the situation, how are authorities responding to this?
Well, apart from asking more hospitals and clinics to provide remote health services to people at home, authorities are trying to supply more self-test kits and give out antiviral pills to more of the population. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said they would provide 21 million COVID-19 self-test kits to some 75,000 stores nationwide this week. This was up by 2 million from what was distributed last week. The total number of kits set to be distributed in the 3rd and 4th week of February is 10 million more than what authorities had originally planned. Also from this Monday, authorities will also expand the age group that can take Paxlovid to those aged 40 and up who have underlying conditions. Moving on to the vaccination front, authorities have added Novavax for use in the country. People aged 18 and up who haven't been vaccinated can make their Novavax shot reservations on Monday. And Novavax is the first protein subunit vaccine to be manufactured in the country. This means that it uses a more traditional method, like those used to develop vaccines for hepatitis B and cervical cancer. So watchers say there are fewer concerns about side effects, which is particularly good news for those who haven't gotten their shots or had to stop in between due to side effects. And Novavax vaccines can be used as boosters and mix and match shots. Inoculations will start from March 7th, and once people reserve the date to get their first shot, the date for when they can get their second jab will automatically be reserved for 3 weeks later.
All right, Ian, thank you so much for your report. We'll talk to you again later in the week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, as always. Now, moving on, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has collected data on hospitalizations for COVID-19 for over a year, but a new report says it's stopping most of this information being made public.
According to the New York Times Sunday, citing people familiar with the data, say the CDC has only published a tiny fraction of the data it has collected. Some of it includes detailed, timely data on hospitalizations by age and race, which could help officials identify and help populations at highest risk. The report adds information on hospitalizations and deaths by age and vaccination status, would help inform whether healthy adults needed booster shots. The CDC is also said to have withheld information on wastewater analysis, which would spot emerging variants early. Western officials are sounding the alarm at Russia as Russia is planning a full-fledged attack against Ukraine, with the U.S. once again warning it could be imminent. Citing an anonymous U.S. government official, U.S. media is reporting Russia has close to 75% of its forces deployed against Ukraine. Kim Hyo-sun has the story.
The U.S. claims Russia has close to 3/4 of its conventional forces postured against Ukraine. Citing the latest intelligence assessment, an unnamed U.S. official told CNN that having such a deployment within striking distance of Ukraine is highly unusual. The official added that this is part of the reason why Washington believes Moscow is ready to attack. CNN says some 120 of Russia's 160 battalion technical groups are positioned within 60 kilometers of Ukraine. Citing the official, CNN added as many as 190,000 Russian troops combined with separatist forces could have been deployed around Ukraine. Some 35 of Moscow's 50 air defense battalions have also reportedly been deployed. The Biden administration is warning its Western allies there is a high possibility of Russia targeting Kiev, Ukraine's capital, in the coming week. It added other cities in eastern and southern Ukraine could also be targeted. Warning Russia is moving ahead with its invasion plans, America's top diplomats again called for a diplomatic solution. In a televised interview Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken underscored that the Biden administration remains convinced Moscow is poised to invade Ukraine, citing numerous reasons. However, he also said President Biden remains willing to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
An overwhelming majority of Iranian lawmakers have urged the country's leader to obtain guarantees from the West that they will not withdraw from the long-stalled nuclear deal after it's renegotiated. According to Reuters, in a letter to the president, 250 lawmakers have laid out 6 conditions for agreeing to return to the 2015 nuclear agreement. It states Tehran should only return if all sanctions are lifted. The letter also includes securing a guarantee from the West that they not trigger the, quote, snapback mechanism that reimposes sanctions if Iran violates the terms of the deal.
Now, the 2022 Winter Olympics came to a close on Sunday in Beijing. Passing the torch to the next host city, the Chinese capital, is now the first city ever to have hosted both the Summer and Winter Olympics. Ahn Cheol-soo with this report.
A shining snowflake floats into the air and brightens the night sky, and a fireworks display spells out the slogan, "One World, One Family." Extinguishing the Olympic flame, Beijing wrapped up the 17-day-long Olympics, finishing off a Games that goes down in history as the Chinese capital is now the only city in the world to have hosted both a Summer and Winter Olympics. With Chinese President Xi Jinping on hand, the Games closed with a traditional closing ceremony on Sunday at Beijing's Bird's Nest Stadium. Ahead of declaring the end of the Games, International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach said the Beijing Olympics was truly exceptional.
There will be, first of all, the legacy of a new global winter sport. Winter sport will fundamentally change after these Olympic Winter Games Beijing 2022, with the engagement of more than 300 million Chinese people in winter sports. This is an amazing figure, and it offers a huge potential for the winter sports and for the international winter sports federations.
Some 2,900 athletes from 91 countries competed for 109 gold medals in Beijing. South Korea ranked 14th in the medal tally, winning 2 gold, 5 silver, and 2 bronze medals. Posting on his social media, President Moon Jae-in said he was proud of all of South Korea's athletes, saying they'd done their best at each and every moment. Mentioning some of them by name, he said he appreciated all the athletes, adding that everyone is a winner. As the second Olympics held during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Beijing Olympics had the strictest restrictions in place with what Chinese authorities called a closed-loop system. It was also overshadowed by outrage over a doping scandal and the U.S.-led diplomatic boycott over China's human rights issues. The Italian cities of Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo will host the next Winter Olympics in 2026. Ahn Cheol-soo, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. As we just heard from our coronavirus correspondent, South Korea's new daily COVID-19 infections topped 100,000 for the 3rd day in a row on Sunday, and perhaps we could be seeing another 6-figure day on this Monday as Omicron continues to run rampant through the population. The number of new cases has doubled in around 10 days, and experts warn it could soon be double what we're seeing now.
Most people who contract Omicron are being told to recover at home with medicine from their local pharmacy. For more, we connect to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Midi Women's Hospital in Seoul. Good morning, Dr. Tan.
Good morning.
So, as we all know, the number of new infections is rising rapidly here in South Korea, but it seems like the number of people in the ICU beds are decreasing. So do you think South Korea's healthcare system is coping with the situation okay, despite the situation?
Well, the sequence in metrics is always we see an increase in new cases first, followed by the number of hospitalizations that go up. Then we have ICU cases go up, and then unfortunately we see deaths increase as well. The bottom line is right now we are seeing an uncoupling in terms of the number of new cases versus cases in the ICU. But there are signs that a surge in ICU cases is imminent. Over the weekend, the number of current ICU cases surpassed 400. Again, this is the first time in a month that we've been in the 400 range. And also, over the last week alone, there have been more than 71,000 cases newly diagnosed who are age 60 and over. There's also evidence of strain already in the hospitals. Compared to 1 month ago, there are actually 5,000 more hospitalization cases, so people in hospital due to COVID right now than compared to 1 month ago. And we're seeing more and more healthcare workers call in sick because of COVID, more nurses and also doctors. So I'm very concerned that over the next few weeks, there may be a huge surge in ICU cases, and we may be in a situation where beds are lacking again.
Yeah, that's concerning when the doctors and nurses start getting Omicron indeed, because that's going to put extra pressure on the healthcare system. Now, despite this surge, the South Korean government last Friday decided to shift the goalpost somewhat in terms of the business hour curfews, pushing it up by 1 hour from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is going to be in place for the next 3 weeks. Some experts believe this wasn't really the right decision. What do you think about it?
You know, on the one hand, if we expand business hours, that could actually lead to less crowding in indoor facilities in the evening hours. There is a potential of a beneficial effect. However, you know, we need to be mindful that we're still on the upslope of the Omicron wave. This may potentially be the deadliest wave so far in the pandemic for Korea, just as it has been for the United States. And my two concerns are that any loosening of measures right now could be premature. And since we are seeing a waning of vaccine effectiveness even after the third dose, we have just started our fourth dose campaign among the vulnerable. And so any increase in transmission because of loosening of measures could spell a more dangerous situation for the people who are most vulnerable in the community.
Now, Dr. Tan, given that the pandemic has been here for around 2 years now, small businesses have been having a hard time, you know, considering the restrictions and social distancing measures, and many are considering flouting them and staying open for as long as they want because their livelihoods are on the line. So, as a medical expert, where do you stand on this?
I understand the frustration. I understand that people are tired. But we need to keep in mind that this is a war. This is still a war that we are fighting against the virus. And the only way to prevail against an enemy in a war is to stay united. There can be no victory. There can be no winning if we start to fall apart amongst ourselves. I also want for people to remember that it's not just businesses and livelihoods that have taken a hit. Since the beginning of the pandemic, 10 doctors, 3 nurses, and 2 paramedical personnel have actually died in the line of duty in fighting against this pandemic. And so I would ask the public, everyone, to stay united. Everyone should get their booster shot, follow the regulations. And that's really the only way that we can get to the other side more safely.
Okay, in regards to the vaccination rate here in South Korea, we've reported on it many times that the country has one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, but still we're seeing day after day of 6-figure cases of mostly Omicron, we presume. Since these vaccines were developed during previous variants, do they actually offer any protection at all against Omicron? And if you are a vaccinated person and you contract Omicron, then recover, is it still necessary for you, considering you must have some form of natural immunity, for you to continue getting booster shots?
Right. I understand that so many people might be confused because we have achieved 86% population full vaccination. How could it be that we're seeing so many cases? Well, it's because vaccines have waned in terms of their ability to protect against infection. However, we should keep in mind, and this is very important, that vaccines still offer a high level of protection against severe disease and also against death. And so that is why we need to keep up with our vaccinations and also keep up to date. So anyone who has not received a booster, who is eligible, must get a booster. If you've had your full 2 doses and then you get Omicron, is that going to be enough of a natural booster to keep you safe against the next wave, the next variant? That remains to be seen. And so that's why the recommendation is, even if you've had natural infection with either Omicron or any of the previous variants, that you do stay up to date with your vaccination schedule. Of course, you should wait probably a week or 2 after you've recovered before you get your booster shot. But everyone should stay up to date, and having had previous infection does not exempt you from staying up to date on your vaccinations.
All right, we will keep that in mind. Thank you for making time for us, Dr. Tan.
Thank you.
Now, one of the biggest questions in South Korea's presidential election has been whether and how the 2 candidates in the conservative bloc might merge their campaigns to make it more likely that one or the other of them can win. Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party, who's lagging behind in the polls, was first to propose a merger publicly a week ago, but now he's rescinded that offer, pledging to stay in the race. Our political correspondent Kim Do-yeon with the details.
A week after he made the proposition, presidential candidate Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party said Sunday that the window for the 2 conservative candidates to merge their campaigns has closed. Ahn having received no answer from his counterpart for the main opposition People Power Party, Yoon Suk-yeol.
존경하는 국민 여러분, 저는 이제부터 저의 길을 가겠습니다. 저의 단일화 제안으로 혼란을 느끼셨던 국민들께 진심으로 사과드리고 양해의 말씀드립니다.
Ahn said it would serve no purpose to wait any longer for a reply and would be insulting to his supporters and those who've been working for his campaign. He also claimed that members of the People Power Party, with whose campaign he had proposed merging, had spread rumors casting doubt on his sincerity in wanting a change of government. That is, for a party other than the ruling Democratic Party of Korea to win. The People Power Party and Yoon Suk-yeol, he said, are squarely to blame for the lack of a merger.
저는 윤석열 후보께 본선거 3주의 기간 중 일주일이라는 충분한 시간을 드렸습니다. 단일화가 성사되지 못한 책임은 제1야당과 윤석열 후보에게 있음을 분명하게 말씀드립니다.
The Yoon campaign responded to Ahn's announcement through a campaign spokesperson, Lee Yang-soo, who said the People Power Party fully understands Ahn's sincerity about a change of government, something he said they must not fail to achieve, and expressing hope the 2 parties can keep working together in the future. Currently, polls suggest a change of government is favored by more than 50% of voters. To make that outcome more likely, Ahn had proposed a merger with a public opinion poll open to all voters to decide whether he or Yoon would be on the final ballot. But Yoon's campaign raised concerns about the poll idea. It said with Yoon ahead of Ahn in public support by a large margin, a survey open to all voters could attract strategic votes for Ahn from liberal voters who see an Ahn candidacy as boosting the chances of the conservatives' mutual opponent Lee Jae-myung. Instead, Yoon's camp called for Ahn to make a broad-minded decision, an apparent push for Ahn to drop out. Ahn's camp rejected the idea outright. Now, with less than 20 days to go until the presidential election, time will tell what impact Ahn's decision will have on the dynamics of the race. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Monday night will see another televised debate between the four main candidates running to the next presidential election of South Korea. They are Lee Jae-myung of the ruling Democratic Party, Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party, Shim Sang-jung of the Justice Party, and Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party. The debate will be broadcast nationwide from 8 to 10 p.m. Korea time. Candidates will discuss economic issues, with recovering from the pandemic topping the agenda. They could also discuss the extra budget bill to support small businesses, which could be put up for a full floor vote this afternoon at the National Assembly. There have already been 2 four-way debates, but tonight's will be the first mandatory debate hosted by the National Election Commission. It will be one of at least 3 such debates required under law after the campaign period began last week for the March 9th election.
South Korea has successfully conducted tests of a light-armed helicopter to see if it can properly function in extremely low temperatures. The evaluation program, which took place in Canada over the course of several weeks, proved the new wholly domestically developed chopper can withstand Arctic conditions. Beijing reports.
A helicopter flies over snow-covered terrain. This light-armed helicopter, developed by South Korea, completed its low-temperature test flight in Yellowknife, Canada, on the edge of the Arctic, where the average temperature in winter drops to -32 degrees Celsius. Seoul's Defense Acquisition Program Administration said on Friday that the 9-week evaluation program confirmed that it has the capability to withstand extreme cold. Around 165 items were evaluated by carrying out some 40 test flights. This included the soaking test, to check that the helicopter's engine and other equipment can function properly after being exposed to temperatures of -32 degrees for 12 hours. These new choppers, developed to protect air assault units and destroy enemy tanks, will be equipped with homegrown air-to-land guided missiles, 20mm machine guns, and 70mm rockets. Korea Aerospace Industries started developing the LAH in 2015 and unveiled its first prototype in 2018. 2 years later, it passed the suitability test.
The LAH had already passed the suitability test, which checked its ability, load requirements, and vibrations. The purpose of this low-temperature test is to see if it can work properly at -32 degrees or in conditions like at around plus or -3 degrees. Once this is done, almost 96 or 97% of the development is complete.
If all goes well, the new aircraft will be certified ready for operational use and will finish development by the end of 2022. Peunji, Arirang News.
Now, the winter cold, which is especially brutal here in Korea, causes blood vessels in the body to constrict, which can potentially contribute to heart and brain-related vascular disease and even lead, in some cases, to death. And, as our Ian Jin reports, outdoor activities in winter require extra caution.
In winter, we see people wearing fur hats and beanies when they go for walks. Some even put a blanket over their shoulders. People going on bike rides make sure they're completely bundled up. While such outdoor activities may be refreshing, it can also be very dangerous for people with cardio-cerebrovascular conditions. The risk comes as peripheral blood vessels constrict in order to maintain body temperature, leading to a sudden rise in blood pressure.
In wintertime, blood vessels contract, causing a considerable albeit temporary rise in blood pressure. That's the reason behind common occurrences of cerebral hemorrhages, myocardial infarctions, and strokes.
Data shows that over the last 10 years, the number of deaths related to cardio-cerebrovascular diseases was highest in winter at more than 100,000, up roughly 122% compared to the summer season. Medical experts recommend that such people should refrain from outdoor activities in cold weather, and those that choose to go outside should do so in company in case of emergency. Being outdoors drops the body's temperature, so people should make sure that their neck and ears are covered, and wearing a hat significantly helps keep warm. Patients with cardiovascular conditions are strictly prohibited from drinking and smoking.
Especially for people that smoke and drink, if that overlaps with being overworked, it causes your blood vessels to contract and make your blood sticky, which worsens the cardiovascular system.
To prevent cardio and cerebrovascular disease, it is important to take preemptive measures to prevent obesity through light exercise and a healthy diet. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
And now we cross over to our Oh Soo-young for global insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It is indeed time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, Western allies are warning that all signs seem to point to a Russian invasion of Ukraine. According to the US government, the number of Russian troops stationed along Ukraine's border in Russia and in neighbouring Belarus, and including rebels in eastern Ukraine, is close to 200,000. Reports that Ukrainian government forces and pro-Russian rebels engaged in shelling that intensified over the weekend. That's also raised fear that this could provide a pretext for Moscow to launch a full-scale attack. To discuss the latest developments, I'm joined by Melinda Herring, Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining us again.
Good morning, Soo-young. Great to be here.
And well, Director, since last week, Western governments, they've been warning that there could be a Russian invasion of Ukraine any time. How dire does the situation look to you right now?
The situation looks very dire. I think that diplomacy is on life support. Today, the National Security Council in the United States had a 4-hour-long meeting. President Biden canceled his travel after that. There's a lot of indications that there may be action, unfortunately, in Ukraine this week. We don't know what President Putin's going to do, though. He has a number of options. Like you said, he has 190,000 troops to the north, to the east, and the south of Ukraine, and he could go in at any time.
Well, NATO said that Moscow is planning a full-scale attack, and if the Russians do invade, then how would this operation be launched?
That's a great question. I wish I could give you a direct answer. So Putin has a couple of options. He can do a full-scale land invasion. He might start in the north in Kharkiv. The border between Russia and Ukraine is poorly defended, so Kharkiv would be pretty easy to take. He could go down to Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, and that will be very difficult to take. There will be a massive insurgency if he tries to take Kiev. He would go down to Dnipro and then down to Odessa, and that would be about a third of the country. So if you look at Ukraine and you look at the river, the Dnieper River, from the Dnieper River over to the east, he could take about a third of the country. I don't think he's going to do that, though. I think that's too much of a stretch. I don't think he has enough troops, and I think the insurgency would be too strong. There's a new poll out from the Razumkov Center. It's a public polling firm in Kiev, and it says that 45% of Ukrainians will fight and will resist. Personally, I think that number is a little bit low. I think that we will see higher numbers of people resisting. I don't think that's what Putin's up to. What I think he's going to do is he's going to stir up trouble in the Donbass. That's in eastern Ukraine. So President Putin and his Russian-backed separatists control about 7% of Ukraine in 2 different oblasts in eastern Ukraine. This is part of the Luhansk Oblast and part of the Donetsk Oblast. And right now, there have been all sorts of weird things happening. There was a kindergarten that was blown up over the weekend, a pipeline that exploded. There's been all sorts of provocative actions. And basically, the Russians are trying anything they can to get the Ukrainians to overreact so that the Russians could respond in kind. And fortunately, the Ukrainians have remained calm and they haven't overreacted so far.
And well, there are currently there are talks between the West and Kiev right now taking place, discussing how they'd arm Ukrainian forces should Russia invade. And well, US President Joe Biden, he's ruled out any chance of sending US troops, but he said that he will respond swiftly and decisively. So what does he mean by that?
So President Biden has done a good job of putting a sanctions package together. He has pulled together all the major Western European countries. And if Putin invades Ukraine again, the United States and the Western allies will put together what I like to call the meanest, nastiest package of sanctions Russia has ever seen. On a 10-point scale, the current package of sanctions is about a 2 or 3. And the package that the West will put on Putin if he invades again is more like an 8 or 9. So it's really serious. You'll see more NATO troops put in Eastern Europe, and you'll see more defensive material, more weapons being put in Ukraine as well. This is not what Vladimir Putin wants. A lot of people have pointed out, if Vladimir Putin wants fewer NATO troops, if he wants fewer NATO members, if he wants fewer weapons in Ukraine, he has not accomplished what he wants. He's going to get the opposite as a result of escalating. Right now, Vladimir Putin has accomplished exactly the opposite of what he seeks in terms of NATO and defensive assistance.
And to what extent do you think that Washington, along with other Western allies, the UK, Germany and other European nations, to what extent will they support and defend Ukrainians? Are there still differences when it comes to the level of action that they're willing to take?
So there is some unknown about this. You're right that Joe Biden has said there will be no American troops on the ground. He's been very clear about that. But he's left open the ability to use the Air Force and to use ships. So if Putin does strike, the U.S. could use its massive Air Force and its ships to strike or to fire back. I don't know if he's going to do that, but at least the president has kept that open. I think Biden made a mistake, though. So Putin, the West has a very weak hand when it comes to Ukraine. It's true that Russia cares more about Ukraine than the West does. That's just a fundamental reality. Russia is much closer than the United States is, right? And what do we do by this? So we try to maintain some kind of strategic ambiguity. You don't rule out options. Even if President Biden is not going to send troops, he never should have said that. I think that was a mistake. So we don't know what the Western allies will send if it comes to that. There's more and more defensive assistance that's being sent over. I haven't heard of any Western governments, though, that have pledged to put troops on the ground, and I would be surprised if they did, honestly.
And while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he's called on the West to take stronger action, and he said that he wants a clear time frame for Ukraine to join NATO. And well, it seems that the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian public, they're not really satisfied with what the West has been doing so far. And also the pace of diplomatic efforts as well. So what kind of support does Kiev want?
That's a great question. So there's a big division between Kiev and Washington. I was in Kiev 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that sticks out to me is, excuse me, Kiev is very angry and very aggressive, and it keeps saying, stop using this overheated rhetoric. Stop saying that Putin could strike at any minute. It's driving the economy into the ground. And the Ukrainian economy is being artificially propped up right now. And it can probably withstand about 3 to 6 months of the current situation. But if Ukraine doesn't have exports, the economy is going to be in bad shape. So one of the options is that Putin just sits on the border and he menaces Ukraine. And if he sits there for 3 to 6 months, Ukraine is in really serious trouble.
What would you say Volodymyr Zelensky's strategy is in terms of diffusing tensions and avoiding war?
So there's a weird feeling in Ukraine. It's partly avoidance and it's partly fatalism. You have to remember, Ukraine has been at this since 2014. Russia came in and they snapped up the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. In 2015, they went into the Donbass, into eastern Ukraine, and they occupy 7% of Ukraine. So this is not Putin's first rodeo in Ukraine. Right? Ukrainians have been at war. They've been victims of Russian aggression since 2014. That's a long time. So in some senses, people sort of shrug their shoulders and say, we know what to do. We've been prepared for this moment for a long time. Zelensky has done a great job. He has a stiff upper lip. And I think it was last Wednesday, he called for a day of unity. And he asked everyone to come out and sing the national anthem. He has not gone in the bunker. He's at the Munich Security Conference here speaking. He gave a very defiant speech, and he called on the West to back them, to back Ukraine. And he said something very powerful. I think it was very convincing. He said, we are fighting your fight. This is not about Ukraine. This is about stopping the Kremlin now. If we don't stop them in Ukraine, they're going to keep going. They're going to keep at it. So we have to stop the Kremlin now. I think that was a very, very powerful speech. I'm very critical of President Zelensky. I think he's been bad on domestic reforms, and he has not advanced Ukraine's European aspirations in fighting corruption. But he's done a darn good job as the commander-in-chief during this crisis. And he's not afraid. He keeps walking around in a hard helmet and his flak jacket, and he's talking to soldiers. He's rallying the Ukrainian people. I would like to see the Ukrainian government do more to harden the Russian-Ukrainian border. It's a very, very long border. I don't think they're prepared there. I'd like to see them do more to prepare for war in terms of government planning and be more open about that. But I know that the discussions are underway.
And well, Britain and the US, they've been threatening stronger, more targeted sanctions on Russia. And the question is, though, are these going to work against Mr. Putin, who clearly has very ideological imperial ambitions?
Okay, so sanctions alone are never going to work. You have to have sanctions plus deterrence. And we have a decent package of sanctions that we will put on Russia if Putin invades again. But I think our deterrence game, and our means the West, I think the West's deterrence game has been weak. We should have been sending Stingers. We should have been sending more defensive equipment to Ukraine much earlier. And NATO should have put many more troops in Eastern Europe a long time ago. So sanctions are not a silver bullet. They're not going to solve the problem. There's some analysis, too, that says that the sanctions the West would put on Putin are not going to actually hurt him or his inner circle. So I think that's something that the West should be considering as we put together, our options.
Well, what does the Ukraine crisis imply about United States' role in the world? And what message does it send to America's partners in East Asia who are observing this very closely?
So I can't answer that question now because it depends on how this all turns out. The reason why Ukraine matters, and it should matter to your viewers, is that if America does not live up to its agreements, if Putin wins in Ukraine, his appetite will not be satisfied, and he's going to keep pushing, and he's going to keep trying to grab more and more land. And it means that authoritarians can do what they want. It means that the rules that we established after World War II don't matter. It means that might makes right, and it will empower China and other authoritarians to go ahead and try to keep testing. Will the Chinese go after Taiwan? Will they keep up their bad behavior in the South China Sea? Definitely. So I'm worried about it for that reason. I'm also worried because if Putin succeeds in Ukraine in a big way, there's going to be a massive refugee crisis in Europe. There will be 2 to 3 million Ukrainian refugees that will be pouring into Poland and into the European Union. And it could also, this could also devolve into a world war if it goes really badly. That's why the Ukraine crisis matters. It's not about Ukraine. It's about Western commitment and resolve. We said that countries have a right to choose their own futures and to choose what, who they want to align with. And Russia can't decide that. China can't decide it. It's up to each sovereign country. And the United States cannot fail this test.
Well, before we go, diplomats keep the West keeps saying that a diplomatic solution is possible. Now, what would this look like, and how does the probability look like to you?
So, Young, I'm really skeptical of this. Diplomats always say that a diplomatic solution is possible. But at this point, I don't see how we get there. So Russia says that it wants to determine who is and who is not a NATO member. It wants veto power over it. And NATO and the United States have said, heck no, we're never going to agree to this. So we are at an impasse, and there's no way to solve that problem. I don't know how you get around that. That's why things have really devolved to a pre-war state, and war could break out at any moment. There's nothing that the United States can offer Russia that will satisfy them. And Washington knows that. It has to say that it's continuing to try to negotiate, and it should continue to talk to Russia, and we should give them the option to stand down. But I'm very, very skeptical that they will.
So right now, would you say it's important to just keep Mr. Putin talking rather than taking action?
I think it's important to keep Putin talking and keep sending that defensive material to Ukraine and get the Ukrainian stingers as soon as possible.
I see. Well, this is where we have to end the interview today. That was Melinda Herring, Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Thank you again so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Rescue operations on the Italian-flagged Euroferry Olympia continued Sunday, with rescue crew finding another survivor in the still-burning vessel, reviving hopes that other missing passengers could still be alive. Since the blaze broke out early Friday, 281 out of 292 passengers were taken to safety, with 11 still reported missing. Authorities have not yet announced a death toll. Firefighters have spent days containing the fire on the 183-meter ship to allow emergency crew to board and rescue any survivors. The cause of the fire is still being investigated as prosecutors have launched an inquiry. The ferry was on its way to the Italian port of Brindisi after departing from Greece. Many of the passengers aboard the ill-fated vessel were truck drivers transporting goods through Europe. Firefighters in Argentina continue to battle the wildfire that has been ravaging through pastures in Corrientes. According to local officials, more than 600,000 hectares of land have been burned by wildfires in recent weeks due to drought conditions in the country. The flame have also threatened wildlife in the Iberra National Park, the largest wetland in the country and one of its largest ecosystems. Many animals have been burnt by the fire, poisoned by smoke, or have been run over on roads while trying to escape the blaze. The massive wildfire is expected to cause a massive blow to the local economy, as many of Argentina's yerba mate plantations are located in Corrientes. Queen Elizabeth II has tested positive for COVID-19 on Sunday and is said to be experiencing mild symptoms. Buckingham Palace announced the Queen's positive test result, but noted that the Queen will be continuing light duties. While UK media have reported that the Queen is fully vaccinated, Buckingham Palace has only confirmed that she received her first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine in January 2021, but declined to reveal any information about subsequent vaccinations, citing medical privacy. The news of the Queen's positive test result comes as Prince Charles, the heir to the British throne, tested positive for a second time 10 days ago. A royal source confirmed that the two had recently met, but did not elaborate on exactly when the interaction had taken place. Over in the French city of Nice, the 137th annual Battle of the Flowers took place on Saturday as the carnival continued for the second week. Performers were seen atop decorated animal-themed floats as they threw flowers at the audience. Around 3,000 flowers decorated each of the floats in celebration of Nice region's horticultural industry. Until a number of health restrictions were lifted earlier this month, the cap on attendance had been limited to 5,000 seated people, but organizers now expect to welcome an additional 7,000 standing spectators. Each year, the carnival attracts more than 200,000 visitors with this parade and festival. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning. Well, it's another bitter cold snap to start the new week across Korea. Cold wave alerts are in place across the country, so please bundle up tight today. Along with rising temperatures, snow is in the forecast. The capital and the west of Gangwon province will receive light snow, while mountainous regions on Jeju will see snow from this afternoon. A sub-zero morning for most parts, and Busan is starting the day at about -4 degrees Celsius. Well, it will start to snow before lunchtime here in the capital area. Highs will be 2 to 3 degrees lower than seasonal norms. Seoul will be going up to 4 degrees. Daegu topping out at 7 degrees this afternoon, while dry alerts remain in place in eastern regions and the capital. This week's cold snap will hit its peak on Wednesday, then temperatures will rebound to the mild side by the end of the week. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. We'll be back at 8 a.m. Korea time on Tuesday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Kim Mo-gyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for watching. Until next time, goodbye.